everybody. Welcome to Let's Meet in the Middle. And last week, immigration. I don't know, man. You're going to chase all our guests away.
No, I'm not.
Last week we talked about immigration, and just on a summary of it, that we kind of agreed on a lot of things.
By the way, real quick, Eric Strauss, Jeff Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah, Eric Strauss, Jeff
Can we
Oppenheimer.
introduce ourselves?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
But most people know us by now, by the way.
Okay.
But my point is last week we had Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino on. We were talking about immigration, and he was right on one thing, where a lot of the businesses were leaving Juarez, moving to El Paso, because the gangs were extorting those businesses, and we disagreed with that because you didn't really think that was happening. I do a lot of business down on the border cities, so those are the things that kind of happen. So last week we talked a little bit about it, got a little heated on some of those things. We are seeing around the world what the senator brought up about displacement because of that type of agricultural climate change, whether it's human or not. Do you agree or not agree?
So the only thing I disagreed with, that I don't like the fact that they're saying that he said the gangs in Central America were imported by Americans. And that was where I took exception, because if there's gangs we're deporting, that means they were imported to our country. Right. So maybe we're shuffling, kicking the can down the road, so he's right on that, but it certainly isn't America's fault. And I think that's the point I wanted to make. But
I think we agree with that.
You wanted to start with a topic about, what was your opening topic this
well, I just wanted to summarize, but we want, last week the kids went back to school. My kids went back to school. I have a new bodyguard, by the way. My son, Asher, was in Taekwondo, and he literally ran across, jumped over two people. Look at that, jumped over two people and broke a board.
Ha!
So I said, Asher.
Dude, that's legit.
That's legit. I said, hey,
okay,
my new bodyguard.
I'm wondering.
You mess with me? Right there.
Here's the problem. If you keep bringing in cute pictures of your kids and I keep not bringing it, like next week, I'm going to promise you that I will be bringing in pictures of my kids, and I'll do something interesting so that I can promote my kids.
By the way, my kids aren't happy when we showed Gage last week with his purple hair going back to school.
Yeah.
He wasn't real happy about that.
Well, he's not going to be happy when he's 25 either, and you show his girlfriend.
He'll be all right. He'll be all right.
He'll be okay. So I wanted to talk about, in my opening topic, the statue. We actually, on my radio show, nicknamed the statue.
I heard that.
So we called it, it's called One Albuquerque, and I called one of my callers nicknamed it One Flew Over the Kirke's Nest Albuquerque sculpture. So I thought that was very fitting. You know that sculpture was supposed to be 8,000 pounds? And so
like 17,000 now, isn't it?
But here's the vision, here's the wisdom of the government. Build a 17,000-pound sculpture that you can take to different events.
And it costs $10,000 to move each one. I think that's what they said, right?
It costs $5,500 right now to move the statue 10 feet. Now imagine if they want to do One Albuquerque at the Balloon Fiesta. They want to move it down to the...
They're going to do that. And look, it's about promoting Albuquerque. Today's topic is about crime. We're going to talk about that a little bit too. But
can we have some common sense?
Look, am I agreeing with that? I don't, I think One Albuquerque is a great promotional piece.
I think it's horrible.
Did they did they need to spend $53,000 and then move it to different locations?
Well, it's going to be more than $53,000.
Well, that's what it costs, though, right?
Well,
that's
right.
What you said.
But now it's up to $5,500 to move it 10 feet down the road to the corner. And then it's going to be another $10,000 to move it to the Bloom Fiesta. And then from there, they got to move it back to the corner, and then they'll move it somewhere else. And by the time this thing is over with, it's going to be $1 million Albuquerque one.
I'm not going to argue that point.
You're
probably right.
To say that we're of one mind. We all think the same in Albuquerque. We are one.
Well, today's topic,
which is creepy on every level.
Well, but my point is, today's topic, we have a lot of guests on today. In fact, I can't even talk about all the guests. We have a lot of guests.
It's going to be a great show.
Today's topic is about crime, and we know how it affects our economy. So we're going to have former police officers talking from the police officer side. We have an attorney, Blair Dunn, who's going to be talking about, because I've been very vocal about the catch and release thing that's been going on a lot. So we're going to have a really busy show today.
So coming up, Brian McCutcheon, Tom Grover, both retired APD, higher brass, if you will, a lieutenant and a sergeant, I believe. So it should be interesting.
Well, that's good.
Get boots on the ground take here.
And we're going to talk about how it's going to affect our economy. And so thank you for P&M, Indigo Mortgage, and Ryan Sewing and Vacuum. Let's meet in the middle.
Yep, let's do it. It's time.
In a time of a divided America, two people from different points of view sit down to talk about the problems, to talk about ideas, to talk about life, and to find common ground. It is now time for Let's Meet in the Middle with your hosts Eric Strauss and Jeff Apodaca.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Jeff Apodaca, Eric Strauss. You can find me on News Radio KKOB. Tune into my radio show. I think you'd enjoy that.
And you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Let's Meet in the Middle. You can email us at meetinthemiddlenm.com or at gmail.com. And then you can also follow us at Democrats for Democracy. So there's a lot of ways to follow us.
The Democrats for Democracy is a platform where people really pile in with opposing views. I really like that.
You don't have to be a Democrat.
No, those conversations go in all kinds of
In fact, Democrats for
different
Democracy
directions.
started because very upset Democrats on some of the issues, and so we've been very vocal about that. But anyway, let's get today's topic.
Today we are talking about crime and business. Joining us today, Brian McCutcheon. I'll say it right, don't worry.
Close on that third one.
Tom Grover. Brian served 20 plus years on APD. He retired as a lieutenant. Tom Grover is a sergeant for APD. He did 8 years service to our community. Thank you both for your service to the community. I'm a 25-year teacher, so I've got my grinding I've done for the public as well. So we're definitely public servants at the end of the day, that's for sure, right?
Well, thank you guys for coming on the show. And one of the things we want to dig into right away is look, crime affects all of us. And to be very frank, I was gone for almost 20 years, New York and LA, saw police activity there. We ended up seeing a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. We moved back 10 years ago and saw how crime had come rampant in the state of New Mexico. I have friends that are APD police officers, sheriffs, Bernalillo sheriffs, Santa Fe sheriffs, Santa Fe police, I'm originally from Santa Fe, and state police. And it's amazing how each police unit looks at crime differently or trains differently. And I'm very frustrated as a business owner, as living in our community, how frustrating it is that our police officers can't communicate with each other. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, how they have a hard time between the cities and the units, organized crime, fighting crime together.
Yeah, because I read the entire DOJ report, piggybacking on, remember the big DOJ report, and it seemed to me that at the end of the day, it was a lack of communication between SWAT, between the uniformed officers, between the special units. What was your experience in the 20 plus years in terms of that element?
Well, not so much a communication issue. I don't recall anything that would insist with that, especially with the people I worked with, high professional, making sure you had to coordinate. My final assignment before I left was over the crime lab, so we were dealing with homicides, crime scenes, CSI, even things lower down the chain as burglaries. So I had 18 people that were going out and responding to burglaries and taking fingerprints and things such as that. But even that, if they saw a trend, if they saw something that needed to be brought up, we were bringing that straight up the chain. So I'm not sure about that with the DOJ. DOJ was more of a use of force type issue. They were looking at the multiple officer-involved shootings. I mean, there were up to 26, 28 of them. And that is eventually what brought that in. Of course, that was right after I had left. Was when
so
DOJ came in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so in terms of cross-departmental communication, did you feel like officers on the streets were being communicated with effectively, or was there a breakdown in the chain of command, or what really, what led to the kind of eruption of problems with the APD? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Tom?
I mean, that's a multi-dimensional question in terms of what was the breakdown. There are substantial deficiencies in a full spectrum of the institution. You had some units that were more equal than others, so to speak, where they could do no wrong, and you had other units where they could do no right, where they were under such scrutiny from the chief's office or from the mayor's office or from whatever political entity found what their actions were as being disfavorable. So within that, a lot of discordance within the department, and in an institution that thrives on consistent application of rules and regulations, you can't create a more toxic atmosphere than something like that. And so in that environment, when you've got poor leadership, it's rife for problems, which, then the community starts stepping in and DOJ comes in.
In the last 20 years that you guys were there, what was the major changes you saw? Because crime is rampant, and you know, today's new administration is saying it's getting better.
Yeah.
But we're still ranked in the top 10, top 6 most violent states and cities in the country.
Oh yeah, we're right up there.
And
at
so
the top
even that
of
we're
every
even that
list
we
on
are
that.
seeing some crime drop, but what was the major change that really happened as police officers, retired police officers at different levels, dealing with administrations, dealing with the police force out there? I've talked to police officers. What was the turning point? What was the major change that started Albuquerque in a downward
I mean,
down
from my perspective, and my entire time in the department was on the streets, you know, down here in the valley, and there are 2 issues on that, which is 1, your staffing levels of uniformed patrol officers out on the street, and then 2, the degree of which they're actually doing proactive activities to enforce law, to maintain order. And the second you reduce those 2 variables, I mean, it's just, you know, nature abhors a vacuum, and so criminal element and criminal activities thrive in that vacuum.
Did you almost, was there a palpable time where you went, oh man, things are starting to escalate? Did you guys hit that guttural time where you saw, wow, there's not enough boots on the ground, this thing's starting to get a little frayed at the fringes there?
You're seeing that now. You have a top heavy. You guys ever heard of the broken window theory?
Yeah.
So
New York. I lived in New York City,
Yeah.
and Mayor Dinkins went to that, and the whole theory is you do the little things, and the big things go
you
away.
ignore
explain it
the,
real quick. Yeah.
and even to put it a different way, you ignore the small things, bigger things follow.
Bigger things
Same
follow.
as Tom was saying with the vacuum. So the officers now it's a top-heavy department. You have administrators that are just putting their thumb, and the officers are being watched. There was just a report that was released that there's 61 officers that are monitoring the other officers who are actually doing the work, but they're checking their video cameras. They're, you know, the Facebook Nazis, as they're calling them. You know, they're checking their social media. They're seeing how they responded to things. There's 61 officers that are taken out from doing police work just to monitor the police.
Because I've been told that almost 40% of the police officers are actually not out in the field. They're actually doing administrative or those type of things.
Probably more than that.
Yeah.
You think it's higher
Probably
than that?
2/3 are non-patrol, non-active law enforcement activities. I mean,
what were the bid numbers this year, Tom? Do you remember?
so
380?
I mean, I think it's around 400.
Okay, that's
but you know, the city. I mean, 400 that's the number of uniformed guys and women that are out patrolling on the street across the 6 area commands. All right. That was a healthy number maybe 10 years ago.
Oh.
The city's changed.
When I came on in 1992, my first bid was 383.
So can you explain what a bid is?
So a bid is when the officers have an opportunity to bid for a shift and a supervisor. It's usually provided once a year per contract, once a year or twice a year possibly, depends. But that's it. So they have by bid by seniority. They're allowed to go in. They say, okay, this spot's open. I'll go ahead and jump in that spot. And then it goes through the full chain all the way down through seniority.
And so you're saying that there's a bid, what was the first bid?
My first bid in 1990, in 93 actually, it was November of 93, was 383 officers. And so, and then, you know, that was only 4 area commands also. So now they're doing 6 area commands with roughly the same number. If it was 400, I actually heard it was less than that. But
Six area
So the
commands.
current bid is 400 officer boots on the ground?
Yeah, so 6 area commands, 10 squads per area command, divide that into 400, and that gives you an idea of the staffing level that each squad is faced with.
So let me ask you guys a question, because as police officers, I believe that you just need to be, you know, when I lived in LA had some issues in the early 90s. They got more police officers within the communities, community policing, within the business leaders. New York did the same thing. We've seen Las Vegas. I can name multiple cities. It sounds like we're kind of going more towards out in the community a little bit more. Is there a reason for that? Is there a reason that we weren't doing that? What's your guys' thoughts on that?
we were trained on community policing back in 92, 93. So it's always been there. It was a buzzword. There was 40-hour blocks of training that were provided to the officers about that, and identifying within specific communities the crime that are specific to that, how to deal with it, and any problems aside from crimes that may be there. You know, nuisance calls, neighborhood problems, neighbor disputes, things like that. But it's all about customer service, is all it is.
Yeah.
But the term, you know, community policing, citizen police. it's always been there. So they put a new flavor on it. It's the same name, but it's just.
I mean, the next time you guys talk to a policymaker, ask them what the 4 models of policing are, because community policing is one of them.
Right.
Let's see if they can name the 4 models. All right, and you know,
what are those 4 models?
I'm going to let you ask a policymaker, then you can come back to me, because I will guarantee you they get it wrong. I guarantee you they get it wrong. All right.
Well, let me ask
We
you.
won't have a policymaker on anytime soon.
We had one last week. We had one last week, and you
Oh,
kind of
boy.
chased him off a little bit.
No, would you
I know,
stop
I
with
know,
that
I know,
already?
I know.
Nobody
But-
chased
so-
off. He
but-
texted me after the show.
I know,
We're
you
friends.
guys are
We're
good.
good.
You guys are good. But
We're good.
one of the things I want to talk about with the police officers is I'm a big believer of decriminalizing nonviolent criminals, because I think you guys, police officers, spend way too much time on minor issues instead of violent crimes. And I think that's why we're going to talk about it in our next segment. I think that's why we see a lot of this rotation going on, some of these nonviolent criminals. I've heard police officers argue my point, against my point. What do you guys think about that? Because it does go back to your theory of the broken window theory.
History repeats. Back in, let's see, when was Galvin here? 2003, 2002? There was a lot of policies that were enacted under him for decriminalizing, where they weren't arrested and put into the jail. They got into so the crime was still answered to, an officer still responded, but they did either a criminal complaint or a citation, something got them in the system, but they were not formally arrested and taken to jail on something that they would have been before. So you're just going through a big circle. That has been done.
But let me, okay, so
And
let me,
see,
but
so
let-
hold
let
on,
me-
let me jump in real quick, because you just asked your question. So in my opinion, I don't think the media is helping in terms of our police force. Just here in New Mexico, an officer went to a fast food restaurant, and the people working wrote pig on his burrito and drew a pig face. Now, they fired the kid, but where does that disrespect for the police come from? Do you think police are culpable, or is it the community, or is it people selling cops as bad people?
I think there's always been a tension between the police officers and the citizenry whom they serve. And, you know, a bad act by a food server like that isn't the first time it's happened in the history of policing. It's certainly not going to be the last time. I think, you know, with the advent of digital cameras and all the on-body recording systems, you know, the public has gotten a closer view into what police officers go through on a daily basis, and that sort of increased the intimacy and understanding what's going on. But that necessarily isn't a positive thing, because police officers have to deal with, you know, split-second decision-making in horrible circumstances.
Here's what I want to get to before we have our segment ends is, in today's environment, as former police officers, can you give us one idea that you would do that we're not doing today that would lower crime and help the situation out?
Flood the streets with cops.
Right.
And allow them to arrest people, or have a little card that they show up with and go, you will not be arrest suspect if...
Take the handcuff of oversight off of them, the way they're being treated now. The officers they're absolutely molasses. They don't want to go out and be proactive as they should be, because they're being oversight.
trained well enough today to handle some of the violent criminals, some of the gang-related issues that we're dealing with today?
It's questionable.
Yeah.
I think it's
Homeland
questionable.
Security says we're not. ICE and Homeland Security people I talk to, they're saying we're
Without
not.
that, it's always,
Yeah, I mean,
training has always come somewhat secondary unless there is a massive, major incident of some type, and then there's an the department reacts absolutely poorly to that.
The roundup they did with Raul Torres, the mayor, the police officers, good, bad, or indifferent?
I think that's a tactic that has its place and can be effective. It's just one tool in a toolbox. You know, you asked about, you know, non-decriminalization issues. I mean, shortly after Katrina came and we had a flood of folks from New Orleans come to New Mexico. I mean, I arrested someone who had an open count for murder out of a parish down in Louisiana. I stopped him for jaywalking. I mean, it's those little, you know, crimes that open the door to other issues that officers.
We're going to
need
have
be
to
able
wrap
move
this
on.
up, but I really want to thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you guys for coming.
We'll be back with Blair Dunn talking about catch and release.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
We are connected by rivers, by mountain ranges, by unique culture. But what connects us more than ever? Renewable energy from wind and solar. P&M delivers renewable energy every day to our homes, businesses, and institutions across the state.
And they are committed to 100% emissions-free energy by 2040.
After all, we call this home too. P&M, together for New Mexico.
Ryan Sewing and Vacuum is New Mexico's #1 Brother dealer. Brother's new Luminaire has a built-in projection system which helps with quilting, embroidering, and sewing. Ryan's has a variety of machines to satisfy quilters, sewers, embroiders, and long armors. We offer the finest vacuums like Miele, Riccar, and Lindhaus. Check out our fantastic selection of fabrics and sewing furniture. We also offer classes, repair, and financing. Drop by our store in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Ryan Sewing and Vacuum, serving New Mexico for 37 years.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Jeff Apodaca, former gubernatorial candidate, possible future gubernatorial.
Well,
I love saying. I just like.
I know
saying
you
the
like
word.
saying that. And then
yeah, we'll see.
You know, and
Eric Strauss, radio host. We're here every Wednesday to meet in the middle, and it's exciting.
Well,
First segment was awesome.
Well, and I think today's show, it's about crime and business. I think I don't care what side you're on. I think we all kind of agree, because even there's a new research poll out today from Crime Matters Albuquerque, and the number 1 issue that everybody's looking
It's
at
got to be crime.
is 75% crime. And when you look at the people they polled, 51% non-Democrats, 57% non-Democrats, 43% Democrats. So my point is this is the number 1 issue in our state.
Republican, yeah.
Right.
And joining us now is Blair Dunn, attorney. We had talked before you came on about some of the things going on with the business community, and it's reaching a tipping point, in my opinion.
Right.
And so why don't you start there and take us down, now that we've heard from 2 former APD officers, where the business community's at in terms of the crime.
Sure, and so I have clients that are working on this. They've actually started a Facebook page. It's the Albuquerque Crime Accountability Facebook page. And they're looking at things, and there's 2 different things that I think are the major contributors to what's going on with crime in Albuquerque. You had the officers on, and you heard from them that they feel handicapped. They feel handcuffed by the things that have gone on either with DOJ or things higher up in the department, how the department's being run. I can tell you the business community feels the same way. I have clients that they call for, somebody breaking into their stereo shop, they're running out with the stuff, they catch the guys, they call the police show up, and then they turn the guy loose. So to the broken window theory that you guys were discussing before, if you're not arresting people for those types of crimes, it tends to build. Yeah. And eventually people are just like, well, it's buy one, get one free for crime, because we're not going to catch you, which we'll get to the second point. But really, crime is driven by a lack of enforcement, I think, as much as anything. And I feel a lot of sympathy for our boys in blue in this, because they're handicapped in 2 ways. One is, of course, that they're not allowed to make the arrests, that there's all this crime that's ramping up. They're handicapped by these policies. The world has shifted. Cameras, like they were saying, people have a perception of police that's a little bit different than what it used to be. They have to be a little bit more careful, so they don't enforce it as aggressively as they should be. The other thing is that, we're going to talk about the bail reform thing. That's a big deal for them. I'd hate to be a police officer that goes through the trouble of putting my life on the line to go arrest somebody, to drag them down to the courthouse, for the court to just turn them loose.
Well, and then Blair and I have talked about this many a times, and sometimes Blair blames the Supreme Court, and which I agree with you on that, but I also blame some of the judges, because 57% of the judges today are ruling on what they feel comfortable within their courtroom, because I've always said judges have the freedom in their courtroom. 43% of the judges are pretty much following the Supreme Court ruling that Justice Daniels did, which I totally disagree with. And it wasn't really the legislators, it was the Supreme Court that basically ruled that the DAs and judges have to follow this procedure. And so that's why, and everybody talks about Albuquerque, but Eric and Blair, when I was on the campaign trail, I talked to DA, sheriff, judges in Chama, in Taos, in some of our rural communities. They see the same people over and over and over, and it's not just in Albuquerque.
But again, go back to where you were at with these business leaders and what they came to you for and what's going on behind the scenes now, because like we said, it's reaching a point where we have to do something.
Right, so I have multiple clients, and they've kind of banded together. A lot of them are in that kind of that eastern central type of area, headed towards the mountain, where they have people that come in and are literally committing crimes, and they're catching them, and then they're never actually arrested. They're turned loose. And I would say it's unfortunately rising to the level where a lot of them are feeling like the only way to protect themselves is to engage in some sort of vigilantism.
Wow.
I mean, there was that case, one of my colleagues is representing a guy that stopped two guys that were breaking into his vehicle, and he shot one of them, and he's being prosecuted for homicide by the DA's office because he went out and in the DA's opinion, shot at guys when they were fleeing. So, but
like,
you can't call the
stealing
cops.
your car.
Right. Somebody.
Well, no, that's always been the joke. You know, if you shoot somebody, make sure you shoot them on your land or in your house, not walking down the street, not running down the street.
Right, but at the same token, I mean, that becomes a really close question. And if I'm in the middle of the night and I see two guys, I can't really tell if they're leaving my house or coming towards my house, or I mean, that's
why
really
are they stealing my car?
Right, and I think that's driven from the business sense, and just as community members, as people living in the community, is a concern that really we can call the cops, but they're hamstrung. They can't come do anything.
Well,
and that's driving the businesses to have to pay for their own security. That's a problem.
I want to dig in because Blair sued the Supreme Court. And here's another story today. And it was, I think it's Gerald Holguin. He was, again, catch and release, car wash shooter, catch and released, was out instead of being in jail, right? And then killed two people.
Right.
But I mean, again, and you've sued the state. Let's talk a little bit about that, because some of our viewers may not understand the what really happened, and it was really Justice Daniels that ruled on what the law was. And I've talked to Supreme Court justices that are sitting there today. They're actually waiting for lower courts to kind of sue on this so they can re-rule on that.
So there's a couple things. There was a case that Justice Daniels wrote the opinion on. It was the Walter Brown case. That resulted in legislation. And Justice Daniels was down at the legislature lobbying, texting attorneys that are on certain committees saying, hey, you guys need to pass this reform.
Supreme Court judge, by the way.
Yeah, sitting Supreme Court judge while he's in the legislature lobbying, which creates its own set of problems, right? I mean, that's not really the kind of independence that we want to see from the judiciary. But the legislature ended up adopting what I think was a really good compromise, which was a constitutional amendment that went out that said that if you can't afford a bond, you can file a motion. And it gave the DAs the ability to go after and detain more people that were dangerous or a threat to the community. So that was good. That passed in 16.
And by the way, we all voted on it. I voted for it, and it passed 65, 70, 83%. I mean, it was unanimous. It was unanimous the way it was
written, though. That and how it's being interpreted, I think that's where you're seeing.
Well, no, right. Yeah. So it wasn't. There's nothing wrong with the amendment, but then Justice Daniels, unsatisfied with that amendment, went back to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court legislated rules that essentially took what he didn't get in the legislature and made them rules for the court. And so that creates a lot of constitutional problems. The big one I had was that that's not their job as the court. So we sued them for violating the separation of powers, and then we sued them for violating your constitutional rights under the 8th Amendment, right? So this interferes with your right to bail and not be subject to onerous conditions of release, excessive bail. So we sued for that, and that's what started the lawsuit over the bail reform, as it was really those rules that Justice Daniels pushed through the Supreme Court.
So what were the rules? Just give us some clarity, as simply as you could state it. What did Daniels do to manipulate the rules? Like, did he make it easier to get out of jail, or like, just so people out there listening understand the simplification of what he did?
So the way the system used to work is you'd show up for arraignments, you'd appear in front of the judge would say, okay, I'm going to release you, but you have to put up a $50,000 bond. Yes. You have to go to grandma. She has to put up the money so you can get that. Yeah. They had bondsmen that were making sure that people came back so that those bonds weren't forfeited.
Correct.
So you had this functioning free market system that was getting the people there. Now, were there problems because some people got held on a bond that they couldn't afford, which would be excessive and already unconstitutional in my opinion? Sure. But what Justice Daniels' rules do is they take and toss secured bonds out the window. And so now the judges are told, and this is where Jeff and I do disagree a little bit, the judges are told you shall release everybody on their own recognizance with these conditions in this situation where unless there's no way that they'll come back, that's the only time you can consider it.
The funny thing about criminals is they generally don't follow conditions or rules.
Well, but
isn't that weird?
But my point is, what Blair and I disagree on is I get the rules, but I've never met a judge that doesn't say, I follow the rules, but I can rule within my own. And if you statistically, if you look at it, and you agree with me on this one.
Wait, clarify that point, because I'm confused with how you're saying it.
Because when you're a judge and it's in your chambers, the judges rule within those chambers, right?
Okay.
And they interpret the laws the way they want to. Right now, 57% of the judges are interpreting, I don't agree with that Supreme Court. Challenge me if you don't like my ruling. So they're ruling the way they want to rule, and those judges are keeping people, violent criminals, locked up. 43% of the judges are basically saying, oh, we're going to let you out because the DA is not doing their job or we're not following the rules. So my point on this was, yes, I believe Justice Daniels made a wrong ruling, but I do believe the judges have cause within their own courtroom to basically rule, keep people, if they, because the verbiage, Blair, the verbiage is a danger to society or danger to others.
Right, so you're talking about kind of two different things
Yeah,
here, right? So I mean, one is that when they can hold people, and you may be right on those percentages, but the big number of cases that are appearing in front of judges, they're releasing on their own recognizance. Yes. This guy that's in the paper for shooting at the two twins, he was picked up for pointing a gun at another random stranger 9 days before, and the pretrial risk assessment system said release him on his own recognizance. So he's out. And the only reason he's out is because the judges don't really have that discretion anymore. That's what these rules did.
No, but that's the issue. But the judge that allowed that kid, the guy out to shoot the UNM baseball player, it was clear. The judge said, well, the DA didn't prove facts, but the judge even said later, well, I knew he had shot at police officers 3 or 4 months earlier. That's a danger to society. That judge could have easily kept that person in if she wanted to.
So here's where it gets interesting.
But if you're following the rules of Daniels, how are you going to do that as a Supreme Court judge? You're like...
You can't. Jeff's technically correct. There's a way that judges can do it, but there's no way, especially in Albuquerque, or a really heavy district where you have a lot going on, they have to write a written opinion explaining why they're deviating from those rules. And they're seeing hundreds of cases a day. And yes, you have a couple judges that are willing to say, I'm going to do it. We're going to stick to this, and I'm going to hold these guys in. I'm going to write the opinion so that we can. But most of them, it's just this deal, and they have to rely on this pretrial risk assessment tool for what it tells them.
Because if they go against it, how do we fix it?
How do we fix it? How do we fix it?
I think you
go back to the old system.
Repeal the Supreme Court's rules. We have the constitutional amendment to deal with the few bad examples where somebody gets held and they can't afford a bond. But otherwise, put the bond system back into place, let it work, make sure that the safeguards are in place, and go on.
But we have to do that via the legislative way,
Well,
right?
the Supreme Court could fix this problem. They created it. They could fix it.
But Supreme Court judges are not going to roll over a retired justice court without another case coming in front of them. Is that correct?
No, I think that they could. The problem is
I
that
know
you
they
have
could, but will they?
No, it's not that they won't go against it. It's that you have ideologues on the Supreme Court, and this is a policy reform that's coming across the country, and they want to push that policy reform. It's for lack of a better term, it's a liberal policy that comes out of Soros' foundation. It's driven that way.
Because all you have to do, you don't even have to prove you're poor. You can just say I'm poor.
You're in heaven now because he brought up Soros.
No, it's true though. No, I'm not in heaven. Come on.
Soros
you always oversimplify things.
And Soros is driving this. They're putting money behind DAs that are.
But this is something we agree on. So.
Yeah. Well, that's really where it is. Is that you could fix it through the legislature. I hope that they try to do that. But the
anyway,
Supreme
Blair,
Court can do it.
We're going to have to go. Thank you so much.
Blair.
We could talk another show.
It's
about
another
this.
whole show.
No show. We'll be back after this commercial.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
We are connected by rivers, by mountain ranges, by unique culture. But what connects us more than ever? Renewable energy from wind and solar. P&M delivers renewable energy every day to our homes, businesses, and institutions across the state.
And they are committed to 100% emissions-free energy by 2040.
After all, we call this home too. P&M, together for New Mexico.
Ryan Sewing and Vacuum is New Mexico's #1 brother dealer. Brother's new Luminaire has a built-in projection system which helps with quilting, embroidering, and sewing. Ryan's has a variety of machines to satisfy quilters, sewers, embroiders, and long armors. We offer the finest vacuums like Miele, Riccar, and Lindhaus. Check out our fantastic selection of fabrics and sewing furniture. We also offer classes, repair, and financing. Drop by our store in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Ryan Sewing and Vacuum, serving New Mexico.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Jeff Apodaca, Eric Strauss. Great show so far. We've been talking about crime and punishment.
And how it affects our business.
No, we're talking about crime and business. I'm just joking. Crime and punishment.
I don't pay attention to you anyway.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, I don't even listen to you.
So joining us now is Daniel Trujillo from the Restaurant Association, and John Garcia, former Secretary of Economic Development. He's now with Home Builders Association. Humbled, blessed, and honored to have you guys here. Thanks for joining us and taking the time.
I'm going to be very frank.
Yeah.
The only reason we got John today is because it's summertime, because in the wintertime, he's on every mountain in the world snow skiing. So
Well,
he's never around.
And you on the golf course, so
Not in the wintertime.
turnabout is fair play.
Yeah, you're such a guy. Come on, man. You live a rock star lifestyle, I swear. You talk to a
We're
guy
very
who works
blessed.
7 days a week. So you work with the Restaurant Association. How hard is it to run a restaurant? Come on. That's like,
It's a 24-hour,
your
7
brother
days a
knows
week.
this really well,
Definitely.
right?
It's a hard job.
So
Yeah.
how is it, like, the first segment, we talked to some police officers, talked about the crime and some of the things that they're seeing and how we can improve that. Blair just left, and we talked about some of the legal stuff. But as a businessman, moving back here 10 years ago, growing up here, I've seen it affect, it's affected our television stations, it's affected our radio stations, it affected advertisers. It's rampant. And yes, the crime numbers are going down a little bit, but we're still ranked very high.
But see, the one thing I saw, if you listen to the police officers who were on, is yes, the crime stats might be going down, but again, Jeff always makes fun of me because I don't believe statistics. I always say they're like armpits. Everybody got them and they all stink because you can manipulate them any way you want. In my mind, if you have a news station running a news story and their news truck gets stolen while they're running the story, like that's bad visuals, right? So what have you heard from restaurant owners? And then we'll get to home builders as well.
So restaurant owners have been telling us about the crime situation that's happening on their properties. And unfortunately for restaurants, it seems like the news media has been focusing on crime that has been happening on restaurant properties. So you've heard about what's happening at a brewery, at a local quick serve restaurant. And it seems as though that's where it's happening. And so what restaurant owners are telling us is, what can we do? How can we get involved? How can we tell our policymakers that this is something that's big and we need for them to make this their priority as well?
Yeah, because every news story costs businesses money. Let's be honest. I mean, when you have a shooting at a brewery, when you have an actual store putting a sign in their window, due to theft, we will no longer take bills or cash. It's like, that's a situation.
That is. And what we don't like is that whenever it's on the news, people don't want to go to that restaurant.
Right.
People don't want to have a night out with your family on a Friday night to go to a restaurant to have a nice dinner because they're afraid of being accosted by either someone that might be homeless, that might be on drugs, that might not be mentally stable, or crime might happen. They might get robbed while walking to a restaurant or in the parking lot. And that's something that's a big concern for restaurant owners, and we want them to feel safe when they come to these restaurant establishments. These eateries are here for them to enjoy, and when you have this situation happening, people have a second thoughts about going to a restaurant.
John, I mean, you did economic development at the state level, at the city level. You're now running the executive vice president of the Builders Association. I mean, you're a New Mexican. You've been here your whole life. Help us a little bit. What's going on? Is it getting better? Because we talked about this. We know that small businesses continue to have a hard time growing, and outside businesses are not going to come here if we don't fix this crime problem.
So, thanks, Jeff, and great to be on your program, guys. Thanks. 20 years ago, when I was secretary, we would recruit companies, and you're competing with other states, other communities for projects, for economic-based jobs. And so you tell your story, and then they put it on P&L, and they look at what kind of incentives you have, and that's how they measure it, and then they pick a city. Well, that was 20 years ago. Now, crime and education were not issues. Now they're number one. The stigma that you get from the crime issues, they're national. Everybody knows that what our rankings are, and so it becomes a huge issue because if a company moves here, they got to deal with crime, but they also have to recruit talent. And when they're recruiting talent and families, and they say, well, here's the crime situation, and same thing with the education. That's a different topic. It has now become a deterrent to attracting good economic-based jobs to the community.
What people always talk about is, you may be able to get a company here, and you may be able to get someone interested to come do that job, but most companies and most of those people that come do those jobs, they leave because no one takes into effect the significant other and the family. And those people won't come here, and that's deterring decisions to come here.
Well, it affects attracting economic good economics to the city. It also is a deterrent. We'll talk about that, I think, at the end. How can we fix it? But a better economy also is a direct correlation to, a better economy, better crime situation. So we really do need to get a handle on this. It is not good.
Because if people don't want to come here, as a home builder,
right?
I mean, that's not a good sign. When we have more of our young people, which Jeff and I talked about already, leaving the state for job opportunities than staying in the state, that's a situation.
And then we talked about this last week. We even see families moving now, and they're taking their elementary and middle school kids, and that population is down 9%. So it's rampant. And so as business leaders, as industry leaders, what's the solution? What do you guys see that we could do?
There are a few things. I mean, we all need to get together to fix the problem. Blair's right. I mean, the judges, the courts, you guys talked about that. That's a problem. You can't just catch and release. New York City, you brought up the breaking windows thing that came up, and we're trying that now. I think the city now is I talked to Lieutenant Ray Del Greco, who's now the area command for downtown. A great guy, and he's been on all sides of crime in the city. They are from community policing to really getting a relationship with the community and the business community, especially downtown, because it's a long-term solution. It's community policing kind of in a way, but it also is a relationship with the community, and that's when they talk about I think you need to put more traffic cops out there. They need to see them on the streets.
Because those traffic cops can be the front line of defense.
But everybody sees the cops there, and if they got contraband in their car, they're going to be a little afraid of that issue, and it becomes a deterrent.
Yeah,
and to go along with what John had just mentioned, we've also been we're a member of the Albuquerque Coalition for a Healthy Economy. So it's a coalition of business leaders, individuals who have come together to address these concerns. And we would like for people to go to ABQ, to Albuquerque, to Crime Matters ABQ, and send a message to our public policymakers that this is a concern for everyone, and we'd like for them to redirect their priorities to this particular issue.
Yeah, because look, without healthy businesses, we don't have jobs, we don't have money flowing back into our economy, and then we don't have people building homes. Right. Like every hand feeds the other. That's what people don't get about minimum wage laws. If I'm a restaurateur and I have to pay someone $15 an hour, that's money that's going to go into the cost of my burger. And then ultimately, that's money that you're going to be spending that goes away from money for a mortgage. And if everybody could understand how an economy works and how we rely on each other, I think the conversation could move forward just a bit more.
Well, and I think if you go to your website and take a look at the study you did, I mean, again, it's nonpartisan. 75% of the people, according to your study, 75% of the people are basically saying violent crime is the number one thing. Let me ask you a question, because as a small businessman, what I see, and I'm a big believer of decriminalizing nonviolent crimes, and let me put this in perspective, because this is where Eric and I probably don't get along or don't agree with, is a third of the people that go through our court systems, or a third of the people, or half the people that are literally harassing these small businesses or doing residential, they're actually drug addicts. And so they're actually breaking in because of drug issues. I believe instead of throwing them into our private prisons, which is making them better criminals, by the way, that we should put those resources into drug addiction, job training opportunities, so we can get at least a third, 30 to 40% of that out of our system. That would open up doors for the DAs and the police officers. What's your guys' thought on that? Because when I talk to small businesses, it's really, they're more worried about, Jeff, they're always high on drugs.
Well, I'm a small businessman too. I'm 5 foot tall, and so I mean, I do represent the business community in that regard. Blair was 7 foot tall. I mean, oh my God, he's huge.
By the way, John's not that short, by the way.
So there's underlying issues for sure. Drug addiction, mental health issues, drug abuse. All of those things are underlying issues. But which is the cause? Which is the effect? I mean, they feed. If you don't fix it, then they become paramount to each other. So the underlying issues have to be addressed and dealt with. The county raised the tax. And you can make this political or not, but they raised the tax for mental health. Yep. What are they doing with the money? It's sitting there. They haven't done anything with this money, and they need to get it to the resources to fix the problem for mental health
That money's going to go to a different project, let's be
well,
honest.
I mean,
I don't think so.
just
I think now
slow
that
to get-
I'm jaded.
they're focusing on it. It's been a problem for the last, the last administration had some major issues with it, and it's coming back, and we're hoping it's going to come back, and we got to create matching fund programs that we can do as a state. You know that from the state
And
level.
I worked in government a long time, and I'm not picking on the county, because things move slow in government, but they need to make a priority for getting that resource to the community.
Absolutely.
Start addressing those underlying problems.
And we've got to get them early.
Yes.
I mean, let's face it, most of the kids right now, teenagers, we had some training, and what's crazy is, you ask a kid in a high school, are there guns on campus? Couple hands, maybe.
Right.
You ask them, do you feel safe? Couple hands.
Right.
You ask them if there's drugs on campus, without hesitation, every hand in the room. So you tell me where the problem's starting to happen. So if we could get some of those funds back in, I don't know, it feels like there's not as many programs for these young people to try to get off of drugs once they're starting to get in. Maybe some of that money could be spent towards, we got to get them in the teenage
start
years.
with prevention.
Yeah.
But going back to 2015, when we started getting the tax to build this behavioral health treatment center, we've been taxed since 2015, and we don't have any results to show that right now.
Well, I think they wanted to do is, they weren't going to build a facility. I think they were going to get the resource, put it to the resource that are already out there in the community, but they're still slow to get it out there.
Well, keep in mind too, we had, here's another problem we have in our state when you're talking about that is government programs, long-term care is like 2 weeks. Private programs, long-term care is like 6 months. And every expert says it needs like years. So we have to relook at those type of programs.
Treatment centers.
Treatment centers.
There are no treatment centers in our community for
Which
drug
is
addicts.
horrible. That's horrible.
Endorphin Power Company is a small place. And
That's one thing we could
we're working on.
definitely agree on.
But my point is we spent about $270 million on nonviolent crimes, which turn out to be drug addiction crimes in our private system. If we put those resources back into middle school, high school, these type of programs with job training and opportunities, programs that we've talked about that they've cut away from our schools, I think long-term would be much better off than imprisoning these kids.
And then for short term, though, we do have restaurateurs who've been telling us that they have people in their restrooms and need to get them out because we don't know what they're doing in there.
Short term, you've got to clean up
we need to clean up what we have right now. And
you've got to get people off the streets.
That as well. We have to address that as well.
I feel like we're in the bad episode of The Untouchables. We know where the drugs are. Let's just go get them. It's like,
well, let me ask you a question.
Why aren't we going to get them?
So about a couple months ago, Homeland Security, State Police, they did the roundup of 250 criminals. Has the business community see that improvement, or you think that was a PR move?
I
haven't received any
think
feedback.
you got to keep doing that, and you've got to show the public. I ran the state fair one year in '97, and crime was a big issue, especially in that facility. And we ended up doing a publicity thing where we put dogs in a kennel and said we're going to sniff out drugs. Well, I got sued by the ACLU for that. Well, they weren't drug dogs; they were dogs we got at the pound. The whole thing was to send a message that we're going to be tough on crime, bring the kids in. And every day, for 5 days, they had a story about the dogs in the kennel, and behind there's people with strollers. And that was the right message to do. We also did a sting and got rid of a lot of drugs and prostitution and alcohol, which is not allowed on the state at the time. And we arrested them. I had two death threats during that time. Well, because of those tactics.
We need to wrap it up, but I want to thank you guys for coming in
thank
today.
you so much.
We'll finish up, hopefully talk about how we can meet in the middle. Thank you all so much. We'll be right back after this moment.
Ryan Sewing and Vacuum is New Mexico's #1 brother dealer. Brother's new Luminaire has a built-in projection system which helps with quilting, embroidering, and sewing. Ryan's has a variety of machines to satisfy quilters, sewers, embroiders, and long armors. We offer the finest vacuums like Miele, Riccar, and Lindhaus. Check out our fantastic selection of fabrics and sewing furniture. We also offer classes, repair, and financing. Drop by our store in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Ryan Sewing and Vacuum, serving New Mexico for 37 years.
I'm Ben Lucero, president and owner of Indigo Mortgage. We are a locally owned and operated mortgage company right here in New Mexico. This means your loan officers and processors are right here to serve you. Indigo Mortgage offers better rates and terms than that of big banks and out-of-state lenders. Our mortgage divisions include residential, commercial, construction, reverse mortgages, and VA mortgage loans. Let us serve you with an exemplary level of care. Indigo Mortgage, because nobody cares more about your mortgage loan.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Jeff Apodaca, Eric Strauss. We've been talking about crime and business. Oh boy.
I know.
And I
By
talk
the way,
over you.
I just realized I'm looking at Facebook because when we do Facebook Live during the show, man,
Yeah.
we got a lot of mics and cameras going on up here.
Yeah, we do.
I just realized that.
We want to thank P&M, Indigo Mortgage, and Ryan Sollenbach. If you need a new vacuum or sewing machine, stop over at Ryan Sollenbach. Great
And
guy.
Indigo Mortgage
Yeah.
and My Mortgage and P&M,
Yep.
they keep our
That
costs
guy,
low,
yep.
going 100% renewable, and employ 30,000 New Mexicans. So thank you guys for that.
Awesome. Thanks for everything. We really appreciate
And then
them being part of
our favorite
show.
new breakfast place, the
Kitchen.
Kitchen 135.
Yep.
I'll be there tomorrow morning, by the way. And I'm having green chili, not Christmas.
It's because you didn't invite me. Do I need to really talk about that?
You're at school tomorrow.
Hey,
anyway,
Strauss,
look,
you come for breakfast?
Hey, Strauss, can you
Okay.
come for breakfast?
All right, so we want to get to where we meet in the middle. So let's start on the things we agree on. Cool? You want to do
Agreed.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I think everybody, all our panels agree we need more cops on the street.
More police officers,
More police
for sure.
officers. We've
That's
talked to
number
Tim
one.
Caller. I've talked to Roll Torres. They're recruiting more, so we all agree on that.
Okay, I'm going to say with that, cops on the street with little cards in their pocket to tell people how to who they can arrest, who they're not. Is you need to let cops do their job.
Well, and
you can't micromanage the cops. Police work is violent. The public needs to understand that arresting someone is not an easy process. And if they're going to videotape everything, you're going to put the handcuffs on the cops.
Well, I think you got to videotape people because that's just
lapel.
Lapel, because it protects the police officers.
But the people going, innocent bystanders,
By the
filming
way,
the officers so
that's
they
what
can go viral.
By the way,
It's
that's
just
the First
ridiculous.
Amendment. I
But
don't
it's just-
disagree with you, but
right.
we can't stop that.
No, I agree.
So
but,
let's control
but
things
as a
that we can't stop.
community, we should quit vilifying
But
the
at
cops.
the same time, we need, I know the officers basically talked about community policing. We've been doing it. I can't wait to find.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't,
been since.
but no,
That's
but,
nothing
but,
new.
but we have seen, I have seen, and there's a couple things we didn't talk about today.
Yeah.
One, Albuquerque PD has been trained many years, and they're changing that now. They've been changed, as my other police officers from outside the state or other divisions say, they do tactical training. So it's a very aggressive move. Where you look at the state police or you look at other police forces, they basically are trained to survive. Your state police officers, which I think have the toughest jobs, I mean, their backups could be an hour away. So state police officers are trained to survive the moment. So I think if we look at it that way a little bit more and get our police officers, more police officers out in the community, I think that's going to help and lower early intervention crime.
I think having 40% of our police force. How many was the bid? Like 400 was the bid, they said? And how many officers are actually out on the street? And how many, I don't know, maybe we need to come up with a new term called police bureaucrat or something.
Well,
how many of them are sitting there scout? Why are you looking at police officers' social media accounts? Like, that's ridiculous.
Well, what we do
Social
agree
media,
on, we need to
you
bring
know
more
that,
police officers
is
back.
your own personal space. You shouldn't be. That shouldn't be part of your job.
Now, one of the other discussions that we talked about is that I think we agree on is the catch and release thing, the Supreme Court.
Horrible.
I think some of the things that, again, I go back to there are 2 or 3 Supreme Court judges that I believe would overturn Justice Daniels. They're not going to say it publicly, but the Supreme Court is either waiting for legislators to change things or they're waiting for a lawsuit or some kind of case to hit them because judges are not going to overrule other judges.
See, that's where I find that weird, and I'm not going to disagree with you on this, but I find it that, look, if somebody retires and we used to do it this way, to me that's the best time to say, whoever that was that retired, let's take a look now that he's gone or she's gone and see where in any organization. Right. Because it's so funny because sometimes I can work 2 ways. A new person can come in and grenade all the good stuff, or a new person can come in and say, let's change it. I just find it weird that if I'm a Supreme Court justice, why wouldn't, if a justice retires and was doing wacky stuff, why wouldn't I vote against that?
I'm just telling you.
It's weird,
Justice,
though, isn't it?
Justice Daniels lobbied for this. He didn't get what he wanted. He then ruled on it while he sat as the Chief Justice. What I'm just telling you is a judge is going to make a ruling on a case in front of them. They're not going to go back to rulings
so
that's
you're
already
saying
happened.
we need to sue to get anything to
I think
change?
that our
Or
Supreme
someone
Court
needs to
today,
change?
I think our Supreme Court today would rule differently.
Okay.
They're just waiting for some case to go in front of them, and that's what Blair and I talked about.
Yeah, that
somebody
seems weird
sue.
to me. Yeah.
Right?
So the other
But
thing we agreed on was if we're going to have tax money set aside, and Daniel from the Restaurant Association said they taxed us for mental health, and then I got a bunch of crazy people in my restaurant.
Well, what's happening
so
is
that's the issue, and drug
happening
addiction.
What's happening is, I'm not going to blame administration. So what's happening is 8-10 years ago, we literally put 20 mental health businesses out of business. We're now trying to bring them back. It's taking time. But
they're not spending the tax money we've set aside to help drug addiction, or we have no facilities. John said we had
that's
no
the point.
facilities.
I'm telling you, we put 20 out of business in the last administration. No, we don't want to argue about that. One of the things we do disagree with is, because you kept telling me off at commercial, is what is nonviolent criminals? The DAs, the judges, the police officers, 1/3 to 40% of the people they're arresting are drug addicts. And most of those are doing residential or business crimes. They're not violently hurting somebody. My proposal is we spend $270 million, but we spent well, that's where you and I disagree. We spent $270 million on that and put them in prisons. We're making them better criminals. When you look at Arizona, Texas, other conservative states that put resources to those programs, you're a high school teacher, my friend, a lot of the programs that keep those kids out of that situation have been cut away because of resources.
That we can agree on. I just disagree. If someone's breaking the law, they get arrested. I don't know what your nonviolent
but
versus
we're putting
violent.
them in jails. But we're putting them in jails and making them better criminals. If you put them in rehab, and job training programs.
If you put a drug addict in a drug rehabilitation program and they don't want to be there, let me make you a promise. They will not be successful.
But my point is, if you're 60-70% successful, then I agree.
Based on,
I agree with you that there might be 20-30%.
When they're recording success statistics, what is
I'm going to email you the programs in Arizona and Texas.
Why I'm so suspicious of statistics? I mean, if you look at gun deaths,
great show today.
Half of them are violent suicides.
We got to go to commercial. We'll be back after this break.
Thank you.
We are connected by rivers, by mountain ranges, by unique culture. But what connects us more than ever? Renewable energy from wind and solar. P&M delivers renewable energy every day to our homes, businesses, and institutions across the state.
And they are committed to 100% emissions-free energy by 2040.
After all, we call this home too. P&M, together for New Mexico.
Welcome back to Let's Meet in the Middle. Jeff Apodaca, Eric Strauss.
Our fourth show today?
Fourth show.
Fourth show. We did crime and business.
You can find me on newsradio, KKOB.com. By the way, tune in, listen to the Eric Strauss show. I think you'll enjoy it.
And you can follow me at New Mexico Democrats for Democracy, New Mexico Minute, and also our Facebook, Let's Meet in the Middle.
And tune into that because it's a wonderful format. It's Democrats, it's Republicans, they debate issues. Everybody seems fairly civil. Now I say fairly, but
we have invited everybody to the table because it's not about promoting the parties, it's about promoting policies and issues.
Yeah.
But today's show, I think we got real insightful. We got a lot of information.
Yeah.
We agree on a lot of things. This
we do.
is one area we agree on.
I mean, crime, if you can't come together in the middle on crime, and knowing, one thing we for sure agree on is you've got to get crime down in Albuquerque.
Absolutely.
This needs to be a livable place to raise our kids.
More cops. Got to have the judges start overruling the Supreme Court rules.
No more catch and release boomerang criminals.
Where we disagree,
but we have to. We as a community need to fight for those things.
But I believe we also have to put resources instead of imprisoning some of the drug addicts that are causing a 30 to 40%. And dude, it's clogging up our court systems. It's clogging up the DAs. That's why these violent criminals are getting out.
I'm telling you. If you break the law, you get arrested. Now, what we do with them from there is putting a drug addict in rehab when they don't want to be there is like selling ice cream on a ski slope.
I'm going to send. We're going to post it on our Let's Meet in the Middle Facebook page. I will show you statistics in Arizona and Texas.
Facebook, thank you for tuning in today. Ryan Solomvac, Indigo Mortgage and P&M, thank you for your sponsorship. Jeff Apodaca. Thank you, my man.
In the middle, brother. Next week's show, we're going to be talking about education. So, hey, New Mexico, never give up and always find a way.
make a difference, and we'll see you next week.
Next week. God bless you.
God bless.
Find us on Facebook at Let's Meet in the Middle, or you can email us at meetinthemiddlenm@gmail.com. This is a production of the Sun Broadcasting Network.